From the moment he stepped inside the cage, you knew something was different. It wasn't just the way he moved or the ruthless precision of his takedowns. It was the stillness before the storm, the kind of quiet that speaks louder than any roar. His eyes scanned the crowd not for approval but for purpose, calm like a monk, deadly like a storm. No trash talk, no theatrics, just focus, pure, immovable, purpose-driven focus. While the fight world craved chaos, Khabib was the silence that conquered it. Before the UFC lights ever touched his face, there was a boy in the mountains of Dagestan, shaped not by luxury but by survival. A father's discipline, the harsh terrain. A childhood of grit, not games. And that boy wasn't raised to chase fame. He was built to become a symbol of resilience, of heritage, of legacy. He wrestled bears before he wrestled men. The footage surfaced years later, this wild image of a child grappling with a bear cub, and the world gasped. But what they saw as shocking, his people saw as preparation. That cub was never the enemy. It was a teacher, a test. If you could stand your ground against nature, how could a man break you? That's how Khabib learned, lessons passed down in silence and pain. His father didn't give him dreams, he gave him discipline. And that discipline became armor thick enough to protect a soul that would one day walk into global arenas without blinking. He wasn't trying to be unbeatable, he was trying to be unbreakable. That's a different kind of power. One born not in hype, but in heritage. His scars weren't for show, they were scriptures carved by sacrifice. And when he entered the UFC, the world expected another showman. But Khabib wasn't there to play the game. He was there to reset the rules. In an industry addicted to trash talk and viral clips, he showed up with silence and domination. No gimmicks, no selling points, just undeniable skill. Every step forward was calculated, every blow purposeful. He didn't entertain, he executed. And somehow that made him even more magnetic. Fans didn't just watch him fight, they studied him. Because what he brought wasn't just violence, it was philosophy in motion. Every round was a sermon, every win a parable. Humility, honor, focus. These weren't just values, they were weapons. And every time he stepped inside the octagon, he was carrying more than gloves. He carried generations, traditions, and a promise. You could feel the weight on his shoulders, ancestral, sacred, immovable. His father wasn't just his coach, he was the architect, the one who instilled purpose so deep it became breath. And when that guiding light was taken too soon, something inside Khabib shifted. The silence grew heavier, the cage colder. But even in grief, he didn't shatter. He rose, not with rage, but with resolve. His final fight wasn't for glory, it was a farewell, a son's tribute. Each punch landed with memory. Each takedown whispered, "Thank you." And when the bell rang, he didn't scream, he didn't celebrate. He knelt, placed his gloves on the mat, and let the tears speak. That wasn't retirement, that was reverence, a promise fulfilled, a mission completed with dignity so profound the whole world fell silent with him. Most fighters don't get to choose their ending. The game chews them up, spits them out, and leaves them chasing a final shot. Not Khabib. When he said he was done, it wasn't a marketing move. It was a statement. No comebacks, no hints. Just closure, wrapped in principle. Because when he spoke, it was never for attention. It was for truth. That's why his silence became the loudest farewell the sport had ever seen. He didn't just retire undefeated. He retired untouched by scandal, by spectacle, by ego. He walked away with everything that mattered, leaving behind a legacy that didn't need hype to echo. In an industry built on noise, Khabib's restraint became revolutionary. But that restraint wasn't weakness. It was the ultimate flex. In a time when clout is currency and viral is victory, he chose discipline over drama. Where others chased beefs, he chased peace. Where others shouted, he listened. That kind of control doesn't come from talent alone. It comes from knowing exactly who you are and refusing to let the world rewrite you. Every press conference, every face-off, every headline. He stood still. He didn't bite back. He just smiled and waited. And when the cage closed, he let his hands do the talking. He didn't fight to sell pay-per-views. He fought to remind the world what power looks like when it's quiet. His greatest rivalry wasn't with an opponent. It was with the noise, the spectacle, the circus. And in the most chaotic moment of his career, when all eyes were on him after the biggest win of his life, he didn't soak in the glory. He looked inward, like a man who knew victory wasn't the destination. It was the cost. He had defended more than a belt. He had defended honor. And when the smoke cleared, he didn't linger. He left with purpose. Because true warriors don't stay for applause. They disappear into legacy. And that's exactly what he became. Not just a champion, but a chapter in the history of restraint. And even now, years after his retirement, his presence remains. Not because he's online shouting into the void, but because his silence still fills rooms. You see it in the fighters who emulate him, the gyms that echo his discipline, the interviews that still reference his name when greatness is discussed. His impact didn't end with a walkout song. It seeped into the bones of the sport, changed how people move, how they prepare, what they respect. He wasn't a moment. He was a movement. One that didn't just dominate, it dignified. It proved that mastery doesn't need flash, it needs focus. What separated Khabib from everyone else wasn't just his record, it was his reflection. His ability to look in the mirror and know who he was before the fame, during the fame, and after it. Most athletes get lost in their own myth. Khabib never even wrote one. He lived it, quietly, deliberately, with no shortcuts, no sellouts, no compromises. His journey was paved not by highlight reels, but by habits. The kind built in cold gyms and quiet mornings. The kind that don't trend, but transform. And that transformation now lives in others, not just fighters, but fathers, sons, and seekers of clarity in a chaotic world. And now he's not just remembered for what he did, but for how he did it. No scandals, no breakdowns, just legacy sealed in silence. And somehow that silence still speaks. Louder than knockouts, louder than trash talk, louder than fame. Because what Khabib gave wasn't just wins. He gave a way to fight without hatred, to rise without arrogance, to lead without losing yourself. And in a world that constantly begs for more flash, more sound, more chaos, he reminded us of something eternal. That sometimes the strongest voice in the room is the one that doesn't need to speak at all. Even in retirement, he never vanished. He just shifted. From fighter to mentor, from storm to steady stream. Khabib wasn't trying to stay relevant. He was trying to stay useful. And that shift became his second chapter, not one of applause, but of multiplication. He poured his philosophy into others, not just techniques, but truths. That strength without control is chaos. That fame without humility is poison. In his gym, you didn't just learn how to fight. You learned how to think, how to live, how to carry weight without crumbling. His protégés weren't just rising in ranks, they were rising in purpose. And suddenly, the sport didn't just have new fighters, it had new fire. One of the brightest flames was Islam Makhachev, a student not only of Khabib's tactics, but of his temperament. When Islam captured the title, it wasn't just a belt being passed, it was a code. A quiet nod to a system built not in Vegas lights, but in Dagestani dirt. And when Khabib raised his hand, you could see the pride in his eyes. It wasn't about dominance, it was about continuation. That his father's dream didn't die, it multiplied. That's the power of legacy when it's rooted in values. It grows even when you step away. And Khabib? He was still everywhere, in the corners, in the game plans, in the prayers whispered before battle. His presence never needed a stage. It just needed purpose. Outside the cage, his mission expanded. Humanitarian work, faith outreach, education initiatives. He didn't sell merchandise, he shared meaning. He didn't chase sponsorships, he funded schools. And while others posted highlight reels, Khabib was building highways, quiet roads that led others home. His interviews weren't just about sport. They were sermons in discipline, in faith, in family. And somehow, the man who once stood alone in an octagon now stood at the center of something far bigger. A movement, a mindset, a mirror for anyone seeking a higher way to win. He made people question success. Was it titles and fame, or peace and principle? In his world, it was the latter. He didn't measure greatness in applause. He measured it in alignment, in walking away undefeated, not just in record, but in identity. That's why when he said no to millions, it wasn't rebellion. It was reverence for a promise, for his mother, for the man who raised him to value truth over trophies. And when he closed that chapter, it wasn't a fall from glory. It was a rise into something eternal. Because legends don't burn out, they become beacons. You didn't need to understand his language to feel his message. His posture spoke it. His silence roared it. And in that stillness, people found answers. Fighters redefined their goals. Fans reimagined victory. Trainers reevaluated what they taught. He didn't shout. He shifted atmospheres. Because real influence doesn't impose, it invites. And Khabib invited the world to pause, to see that there's another path. One not built on destruction, but discipline. Not on bravado, but belief. He proved you could reach the top without stepping on others. That the highest ground isn't climbed through ego. It's carried by purpose. He didn't just retire from a sport, he rewired it. And every young fighter stepping into a cage now feels that pressure. Not to replicate his moves, but to replicate his meaning. Because Khabib's greatest gift wasn't a takedown. It was a standard. A measuring stick that forever changed what it meant to be great. And that standard wasn't taught in gyms. It was lived in silence, in early prayers, in long runs through fog, in tears shed after victory, in keeping your word when the world begs you to break it, in leaving on your own terms and never looking back. But even legends feel the weight, the pressure to be perfect, to live up to the myth. And yet, he never flinched. Because Khabib never chased perfection, he chased honor. And that pursuit made every win sacred, every fight meaningful. He didn't disrespect opponents. He dissected them. Not with hate, but with honesty. Not with rage, but with readiness. And when critics came for his style, he didn't argue. He outlasted. Until what they once called boring became brilliant. Until what they mocked became the model. Until even his doubters whispered his name with respect. And still he stayed grounded. No entourage, no spotlight addiction. Just the same man with the same team carrying the same values. While others changed with fame, he became more himself. More simple, more centered, more silent. And in that silence, millions found something rare. A reason to believe. In discipline, in devotion, in a kind of masculinity that didn't need to conquer others to feel complete. He reminded people that strength isn't in noise. It's in knowing when not to make it. When the lights dimmed, he didn't fade. He focused. And through every youth camp, every rising fighter, every speech delivered not with flair but with faith, his legacy deepened. He taught people how to endure without becoming bitter, how to win without losing humility, how to fight with focus and walk away with your soul intact. And in that blueprint, he gave the next generation more than strategy. He gave them structure, a way to live when the world wants you loud, fast, and hollow. He gave them a path home, so now when you hear his name, it's more than a fighter you remember. It's a feeling, a challenge, a call to something higher. Khabib wasn't just the storm that passed, he was the compass left behind. A reminder that the battle worth winning isn't always inside a cage, it's inside your own heart. And as time moves forward, his story won't fade. Because it was never just about what he did. It was always about who he was, and in that truth, he became eternal. A champion, yes, but more importantly, a standard. One the world will measure against for generations to come.